Hello and welcome to the Big East Rewind, where we are bridging the gap between the old school Big East and current day. I am your 7-foot host, Chuck Everson from Villanova University, and my partner, as always, my point guard and my dentist, the sensational Sonny Spera from Syracuse University. How are you, Sonny?
I'm great, Chuck. This is that time of year where I kind of have those feelings of still wish we were in the Big East, you know?
Oh yeah,
Here
this
here
is
comes Madison Square Garden and we're
yeah.
not in that picture. I think we're playing in the ACC in DC, I think this year, but
Yeah, I heard that.
just not the same.
That's kind of a disconnect city. There's no teams that play there. I don't know why they picked DC, but they
I'm
they
not
had it
sure.
at Barclay at last year or the year before, right? Didn't they?
Yeah, they've had a couple times in Brooklyn and a little more attendance than it is in Greensboro. So,
Yeah, I would think. Although the Syracuse fans travel well. I mean,
yeah.
they're fanatical fans. I mean, everything that we do at Syracuse, the numbers go off the chart when we
Mhm.
put out a show and stuff like that. So what
Passionate
did you
fan
think? What
base.
did you think of the season overall, Sonny? The Big East season.
I think it's been fantastic. I mean, I thought in the beginning of the year, this is UConn's race to run, and everybody else is playing for second or third place. And, the very first weekend or two, there was upset after upset after upset.
Yeah.
And you've seen it. You've seen a team beat another team by 20 and then lose the next time they played by 6 or 7. And it's still anybody's game. And I think the healthier teams obviously have the better shots, but the quality of play has been great.
Yeah, I mean, it really has. And the parity has been
Yep.
unbelievable. And I think, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but I think that some of these teams might have hurt themselves from playing in the Big East with now the number of losses that these teams have. I mean, there's a pile up after Creighton and UConn, there's a pile up of teams that anybody could be in any spot. And in fact, the spots for the tournament weren't even decided until the last game was played
Right.
last night. So,
But you
um,
know what? The strength of schedule, like I was looking at your team, your Villanova team, because
yeah,
Syracuse has 20 wins, which is impressive in my opinion. First year coach, the only one in the country who's got 20 wins as a first year coach with no past, head coaching experience. And you guys have 17 wins, but you played, because UConn, Marquette, and Creighton have been in the top 10 pretty much all year, your strength of
yeah,
schedule is
was
through
pretty
the
good.
charts,
Yeah,
through the roof. I know, like for us, Carolina and Duke have been up there. We beat Carolina, which I think is one of our best wins this year, but
yeah,
we didn't fare well at Duke, and we got beat handily in a couple of games that didn't look good, like it was a
yeah.
bad eye test. So I
Well,
hope we're going to be there, but we'll
see.
see. But this is still the time of year, and to be in the Garden, to be around the Garden, New York City's electric, and I'm getting little goosebumps just talking about it right now.
Yeah, it's going to be cool. And there's a lot of former players coming back this year.
That's
You know,
exciting
Eric,
as
Eric
heck.
Murdoch, our good buddy,
Yeah,
he's
Eric's
having an
doing that
he's
thing
having an
Thursday
event
night.
at the Land Shark Bar and Grill between 6 and 10 on Thursday.
Yep.
There's a lot of former guys coming. I know. I spoke with some of the Georgetown guys, Mike Graham and Reggie Williams, and those guys will be out. There'll be a lot of guys out, so we'll have some
Did you
fun.
talk to
So
Charles Smith too? Isn't he got
I
something
have.
going?
I'm waiting to
Okay.
hear back from him. Yep.
Yeah.
So he'll be out. It'll be good. We'll have a lot of former guys and many guests that have been on the show will be around. So
Mhm.
come by and say hello to us. So today, Sonny, we are going to get into it with this guy knows all about what's going on in the Big East. In fact, he is the voice of the Big East Conference, the Fox Sports play-by-play man, the best in the business, our good friend and buddy, Tim Brando. How are you, Tim?
Chucky, good to be with you and Sonny. It's a pleasure. Always a lot of fun. And I
Yeah.
said this in pre production from the green room. This is the last time I talk. Last time I talk on anyone's air, whether it's streaming or cable or linear. Okay. The
Yep.
last time I talk before Wednesday with Raft when we get started with those 3 games. It's great to be with you.
You got 5 in a row, you were telling us.
Yeah.
How do you prep for that? I guess you shut your mouth for a few days. That's what it is, right?
Well, the paperwork's got to be done, fellas. There's
Oh my
I got
goodness.
paperwork. There's paperwork. I got see all this paperwork. It's got to be updated.
Oh no, there's a look behind the curtain right there,
there's
folks.
a look.
Wow.
You like all that? That's a lot of paperwork, isn't it, Sonny?
I hope Raph
That's
Raph uses those little legal pads. I hope
Raph's got a yellow
Yeah.
notepad.
I'm a color-coded guy. I used to actually do my own artwork. Let me show you one from years ago. This was Michigan State in around 2003. Look at that. I used to do this.
Holy
right,
smokes.
with a big marks a lot. But now I'm able to cram more information in with some of the research I get. So it's typewritten, but a lot of it, there's a little more cutting and pasting. And then the scribbles that you see there are the little anecdotal things that I pick up from the coach. That'll all be white out. And then I'll replace it with what's latest when I go to the shoot-arounds or I talk to the coaches and just kind of get the lay of the land, the latest, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be the look of either the Texas Longhorns or the Syracuse Orange, right? That's what.
There you go.
There you go.
So
Tennessee almost.
This would be Rutgers or Ohio State or St. John's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
wow. So we didn't realize it.
I love the fact that you still use paper because that's
Yeah.
my thing. I still like to have that sheet of paper in front of me.
Sonny, we're all baby boomers. All baby boomers have to write it down. Okay,
That's right.
For it to be cemented here, we have to write it down. And if you just give me something to look at on the internet, if you just give me that, like I've seen some of these guys, like I really have a lot of respect for some of the young broadcasters that are coming up today. Jason Benetti is just brilliant. He's way too smart to be a play-by-play man. He should be in a court of law. He is an attorney. Okay, that decided, that's no fun. I think I'll do this. He's an incredible story. But a lot of these guys today, a lot of the young ones, the 30-somethings, they'll come up and they've got their computers out, and I could never call a game and go through a computer. You know what I mean? And
right.
and I want my statistician to have like hard copies of records, because if you're saying when was the last time such and such did such and such, how are you going to scroll on an iPad to find that? You need to be able to go to the record book, flip through that book. You know what I mean? It's just the way we were raised.
Yeah.
I mean, I got to have my comfort zone is with something that's hard. I need something that's tangible that we can hold on to, but that's just the generational thing that we all have to deal with, I think.
So before we get into talking about the conference, Tim, I got to say, thank you so much for all the love and support you've shown us, Sonny and I, for the show and everything. Really, truly appreciate it. You blew my phone up at the Villanova game when you mentioned us, and people were calling me for a week. So we appreciate that. Thanks. And we got good TV time, which was great.
Rolly's up in heaven saying Brando's giving Everson more airtime than I gave him playing time.
That's right. You're actually correct. That's the sad part.
I had people send me video clips of the TV in their living room.
Yeah.
Like they pause. They're like, "Sonny, did you see this?" And I was like, "Yes, I did."
That's cool.
Well, I thankfully I wasn't on my phone texting or anything. I was actually watching the game.
You came off well.
I was with Brian Harrington from the '85 team. That was good.
Yeah. You always have, and that's I've talked to all those guys. I think it was back in 2014, maybe my first year at Fox, when Jay succumbed to the pressure of Rolly to play his team in an exhibition game. You remember that?
Yeah.
Everybody showed up from the '85 team, and I went to the shoot around that day. Steve Shear was producing, and we were there, and it was just memory lane. And so I kind of went away from and talked to a bunch of them, talked to 3 or 4 of them, and I said, okay, now I know who the glue guy was on the team when you guys were playing. I need to know from an alumni standpoint, who is the glue guy and keeping the '85 team connected? And they all said to a man, Chuck Everson. No ifs, no ands, no buts.
No doubt about it.
And he tells us, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this for Rolly. Everybody be there or it's your ass.
Right. That's right. Pretty much.
That's right.
Yeah. That's how it goes.
You
Carries a
impose
big
your will.
Rolodex, Chuck.
Listen, you
Chuck's
know
got a
what,
big
Tim?
Rolodex.
At some
Yeah.
point, the ball stops bouncing for everybody, you know.
That's right.
But I
That's right.
kind of just felt that the locker room didn't have to stop, and
Exactly.
as you know, that group of guys is very, very, very close. And
Sure.
in fact,
And you know
that
what?
was the day I remember, because that was the day it was Coach's birthday, and it was the 30th anniversary of our game.
Right.
And they had guys mic'd up, and you and Raph were talking to guys
Yeah.
in
The whole game.
stands.
Yeah.
So at the shoot around, we had some adult beverages the night before, the team and coach and everybody celebrated.
Yeah.
We had a birthday party for coach.
Right.
And I come in the gym, and we're sitting on the by where the Villanova bench would be. And there's everybody. There's all kinds of coaches. Fratello was there. Coach Gillen was there. It was a who's who of Coach Massimino's coaches there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
So
and you know what?
Royal
so
family.
Slansky,
every team
Yeah.
has that even went to a Final Four. Okay, not just win the national championship, but every team that went to a Final Four seems to stay connected. I think that, you know, if you get to the Elite Eight and you don't get there, you always remember it. You always remember being one step away from the Final Four. But that's one of the great things about college basketball is that, and Al McGuire used to say this, I don't know that the modern fan understands it to the extent that they should, because we're so, our culture is so gold medal oriented. You know, second is awful, but it shouldn't be. In college basketball, getting to the Final Four really still is a big deal. And I think that's wonderful. And I see it all the time because, you know, Dale's 81 team will get together, you know, for an anniversary. His 86 team will get together. Valvano's 83 team that won it all. They do the same thing that you guys do whenever they can. But even the teams that didn't win it, you know, but they got there. Right. They do it at a lot of places. And I think that is, that's just so cool. And the fact that you took the time and made the effort to really keep everybody together, somebody's got to do that, you know?
Yeah. Providence did that with, Providence had the Marvin Barnes group, but then they had the Billy Donovan group in '87 with Patino coaching, and
Harold Starks is the guy for Providence, you know, and Harold
just a connection.
Had an event. There was 150 former players came back for a long weekend at Providence. Amazing. And all the coaching staff. Yeah. It's cool when you can do that, you know, and and that's what it's about, really. I mean, these are my, you know, people just say, hey, we're family. We're family. We really are. I mean, you know, we've had guys struggle, and we've had guys get sick, and we've had guys do well, and everything in between, and we're there for all of them. In fact, you know, my teammates' kids call me uncle, you know, and my kids call the other guys. It's crazy, but that's the way it is. So,
Sonny, this past Saturday when we were doing the St. John's Georgetown game, which, by the way, turned out to be a hell of a game. Georgetown made them play hard, made them play to the very end to win the game. My old buddy, J.K. John Comensberger, who was a research guy with me at CBS, he sent me a bunch of clips and a bunch of nuggets on the history that's going to be made at this year's Big East tournament. This is the 40th anniversary of the very contentious Syracuse lost to Georgetown in 1984. Boeheim's never gotten over that one. You know,
I was wondering if you were gonna dig into that one.
He's never gotten,
nor will he.
Nor will he. And
that was the game when Graham and Andre went at it, right, Sonny? Yeah.
Yes, it was. The following year was the year that Pearl and Ewing got into a little different scuffle. But what Tim is referring to is the call which tossed Graham out by Froggy that got reversed, and Coach Boeheim just lost it.
He did. I want to say it was Paparo, Froggy, and Jody Silvestri,
and Larry Limbo.
Jody was
there.
And
Larry Limbo.
Limbo.
Yeah, they were. I mean, a great crew. I mean, but you couldn't convince Boeheim of that.
Well, it was funny. Froggy gave his version of it, right? And he was very nice about it. But when Coach Boeheim came on it, he named names. He had specific points of reference. And then Limbo called it, and Paparo's coming in with the thumb, and then he rolled. Okay.
And then he kind of half threw a chair. right?
You know,
It
those
wasn't
guys.
much of a throw. He just kind of flipped it.
You know, those guys and Jimmy Burr
Yeah,
and
Jimmy
Mickey
Burr.
Crowley. I'm going to mention Mickey Crowley because
Yeah,
all those guys, they had tempers just like the coaches had tempers, and I don't think any of them could have handled today. You know, all the crap that the officials have to go to with replay and looking at it over and over again,
Yep.
and then trying to determine if it's irrefutable or not irrefutable. You know, video evidence. I think that would drive those guys bananas. I mean, they couldn't handle it. None of them could handle it. Uh, there are guys that, you know, they would throw out that now you'd be looking at video to see, well, is that worthy of an F1 or an F2? You know,
right.
if you threw that combination up to those guys from that generation, they'd go, get out of here. I don't want to officiate anymore.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's interesting you're hitting on it, but you know, we talked earlier, right? 85 was your first year doing the Big East games, right?
Right. And all games, really. I came into ESPN as a freelance broadcaster in 1985, and that opened the doors for me to do literally every league. Now, I had been doing Metro Conference games regionally on syndicated television, okay? Like in the old days, the Big East was on Metro Sports. Remember, they called it Metro Sports. That was the deal Gavitt made. And you'd see Lenny Berman, you know, working with Raft. That's how they became the first team of Big Monday, was because of the Metro Sports connection of them doing games. And there was Raycom and Jefferson Pilot, which I did ACC and SEC games for. But I had not worked nationally, which when I got to the network, I desperately wanted to do some Big East games because it was so hot. It was the hottest league in America at that time. And the great Dave Anderson, the magnificent sports writer at the New York Times, his son, Steve Anderson, was my first producer of college basketball at ESPN. And Steve took a liking to me for whatever reason. He was a former guard at Holy Cross, was really into basketball, and he produced the Sweater Game. That was the highest rated game ever on cable television at that time. I think ESPN had something like 25 million subs at that time. Yeah, and it was 1 versus 2. And the rematch game that Thompson won. It wasn't really that close, but it was highly viewed all across the country. And when he did the deal with the jacket and pulling it back and the sweater, it was just magical. It was a moment that everybody remembers. They still have the picture in the garden, as you know, as you're coming through one of the portals there. To get to be on the Big East took some doing. And Steve lobbied really hard with Commissioner Gavitt to give this Louisiana boy, right, from the Deep South, a chance to do the Big East. And Gavitt was very concerned that this kid might not know the history of the Big East. Steve staunchly responded by saying he's a basketball junkie. He loves college basketball. I think Gavitt thought of me as a college football guy, like most people would think of a broadcaster from the South. And I was obviously just as passionate about football as I was basketball. But Steve got me on a Seton Hall St. John's game, and that really went well. And so I got another Big East game with Villanova. And think about that. I mean, those were 2 teams that went to the Final Four, and I was just beyond thrilled, okay, to get to do a game in the Big East. And that really allowed me to do all the different leagues. And now here I am, almost 40 years later, 39 years later.
39 years, yeah.
And I've been with 3 networks, and I'm doing primarily what? Big East basketball.
Big East basketball.
Yeah.
It's
so
great.
It's really cool in that respect. And these games that are going to be televised will be on a cable network, FS1, okay, owned by Fox. But it really made its name in terms of programming, all right, for their new network, their fledgling network, FS1. They made it through the Big East, that big contract.
Just the way ESPN did.
Just the way ESPN did it. It's like Back to the Future, you know. That creation of Gavitt of the Big East was based really on utilizing ESPN as this 1980s corporate success story in broadcasting. And it took off just as the Big East took off. And Fox, in order to compete okay, with this 1,200-pound gorilla that ESPN had become, did what? They started their own cable network too.
Right.
And here we are calling games of the Big East tournament on it. So the more things change, the more they sometimes stay the same. And for me, the history of the game, so much of it resides in the Big East. And in the modern era of college basketball, I think more people remember what the Big East was all about and how it just took the sport by storm. And the sport was really doing well everywhere else. I mean, the ACC was great. The SEC was probably having its best period in its history all time with great teams. Mm-hmm. But the Big East, because of the media meccas that we were talking about and the viewership and the constant promotion of the game via ESPN and the deal that Dave struck gave them a decided advantage over a lot of the other leagues. And that's how Syracuse was able to recruit kids out of California.
Yeah.
I mean, it was. People were hurrying home after school to watch the big Monday games.
You had the perfect storm. In addition to the media, you had some of the best players in the country and some of the best coaches in the country.
You had
and as we now know,
coaches,
some of the best broadcasters. Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
perfect storm.
And it's the only conference I know of where you can say, "Oh my God, we got Larry Lembo tonight," or you guys know the referees' names. I'm in the street,
How
back
about Froggy
playing. They go, "Who do we got? We got Higgins." Oh my God!
Yeah, Syracuse and Froggy, because Froggy lives in Liverpool. Like, we got Froggy.
Yeah, that's crazy. So Tim, what did you think of the season? You did a ton of games, obviously, for the Big East. What did you think of the conference this year?
I thought it was the most balanced and deep at any time in its history, and that's not just the reconfigured Big East. I think going all the way back to the old Big East, there's really only I saw Georgetown play St. John's. You can't just walk over them. You've got to play.
Yeah.
Cooley, you better get Cooley now because Cooley's going to get really well really quickly there. I mean,
I think so too.
The issues that he faces are different than Pitino's because Rick doesn't have the apathy in New York that he's having to deal with in DC. And he'll deal with that because he'll get better players. He'll get them out of that area. And he's already bringing back a lot of their alumni base. I mean, you mentioned Michael Graham earlier. He's been seen there. Yeah. Reggie Williams is there with his kids all the time. And I think that it's just going to take a little more time for him because when you're trying to use the portal now, okay, players are smart. They only want to transfer with 1 or 2 years of eligibility to a team that they know is going to be really, really good. And everybody knew Georgetown was going to be really, really no good. So they didn't do well in the portal, and that showed. But he's recruiting really good young talent from that area, from the DC area, which is a vast area into Virginia, as you know. And I think that in time they'll be good. But DePaul is really the only really bad team in a bad situation and has been for some time. Yeah. So really you better play hard against Georgetown, but the only checkmark W is against DePaul. That's it. Everybody else can beat you.
Yep.
And I do think the 3 teams, and I'll go in reverse order, Creighton, Marquette, and Connecticut are cut above. I think all 3 could be Final Four teams if they get the right draw.
Yeah.
I think Connecticut is, period. I don't care. I'm penciling them in right now. I would take UConn against the field as a Final Four team right now. I believe they are just that good. They can beat you in too many ways.
Too many ways. Perfect answer.
Yep. I do think Purdue this year with the Jones kid that they got out of Southern Illinois, the way Braden Smith is playing the point to go along with Lawyer and Mason Gillis and these, I think Purdue's got the right blend now to avoid the Shaheen Holloway St. Peter's moment. I think they'll stay away from that this year. So I think Purdue and UConn look to me to be a cut above. And Houston may be too, but
I was going to ask you, do you believe in Houston?
I do. Beating Kansas by 30 got a lot of people's attention, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think that got a lot of people's attention. I was doubting Houston until I saw that game. And now...
Well, we know Kelvin Sampson can coach.
We do. And it's not like he hasn't done it with that team before. I think the difference is, as great as that team was that made the Final Four, they were coming out of the American Conference. I think a lot of people thought maybe they had an easier road, even though that league was actually pretty good. There's some good teams in that conference. But to go into the Big 12, which is arguably the only conference that's deeper and better, if there is one, than the Big East, really says a lot. And I think that credibility that Houston has to win the Big 12 the way they did and to beat a team like Kansas by 30 gives them a lot of street cred, going into Selection Sunday, just, regardless of what happens in the conference tournaments coming up. But the league in general, fellas, I mean, if you're looking at Wednesday and you see that Butler Xavier game, that'll be a fun game. Now they have to play UConn the next game. It'll be a war. And listen, if UConn just comes in with a laissez-faire attitude, I mean, I saw Butler go into Omaha and beat Creighton at Creighton's own game earlier this year. That was one of the most entertaining games of the season. Everybody's got really good players. The Oliveri kid at Xavier is really good. They've been close. Xavier's been close all year. They were close against Marquette yesterday.
Yeah, and Sean's real good too. I mean,
he's a hell of a coach. Talk about
really good.
Great bench coaches in college basketball. He's one of them. And I think along with Jamie Dixon and Matt Painter, those are the three best coaches to have never been in a Final Four that we have in the game right now. And at some point,
good list
they're
right
all
there.
going to get there.
Yeah.
I tell you what, who's underrated, I think, as a coach is Thad Maeda.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I think he's really good. He gets the most out of those guys.
He has just a great.
They were not picked very high at the beginning of the year, and they kind of came in around where they were selected, but they were in every game. And
that's what I'm saying. They're a dangerous team. The winner of that game, which is the first game on Wednesday, that's not a walkover for UConn. I mean, it's not. And St. John's now is riding a hot streak unlike at any other time in the season.
Right.
And this is one time with Pitino, and he backed himself into a corner doing what Rick has done in the past. He became the villain. The New York press and maybe some of the parents of the kids got pissed, and there was a method to his madness. And after doubling down on what he said about his unathletic team,
they're on a roll.
He goes into Georgetown and diffuses everyone with a mea culpa. And then they go on this hot streak, and now they've won 5 in a row. And let me tell you that court, we talk often about St. John's being a dangerous team because they're playing at a place where they play a lot of their home games, but it's never really come to fruition in the tournament. And I think the reason for that is they always had these really very noticeable weaknesses. Okay, the inability to make shots. That was always the problem with Mike Anderson's teams. No matter how hard they pressed, they just threw up bricks. Well, now Rick's got guys that can hit shots.
This kid, Danish Jenkins, is unbelievable.
Oh, from Iona,
he's a great kid.
I mean, I never expected him to play like he's playing. I mean, he's in his peak form right now. He looked wonderful.
Well, he took when Posh Alexander and Adeosu both said bye-bye. I think a lot of people thought Rick was making a mistake, by bringing in Danish Jenkins and saying he's my guy. But Rick knew that this guy was not just a mid-major player. He knew that he understood his offense, and Rick's always had to have that. And that's really the difference. Cooley doesn't have a point guard. He's got a bunch of shooting guards. Rick needed to have somebody that he could count on to be his coach on the floor, and Danish Jenkins is that. And Aline is getting better and understanding the flow of the game. Dingle has really picked it up during this hot streak. So Soriano doesn't have to score as much now for them to win.
Yeah, I think he's kind of hit the wall a little bit. I think once he gets through that happens during the season. You run into a lull for a couple of games. I think that's where Joel is now.
What Chuck and I spoke to Soriano and Jenkins. The one thing that impressed me the most about Jenkins was absolutely calm as can be.
Yeah.
No moment too big.
Right.
He wasn't blown away with all the media coverage and, Patine and all that. He just I'm here to play ball. I didn't grow up a Big East fan. I grew up in the Southern.
Mm-hmm.
area, and he just has a real like a Southern gentleman.
Yeah.
I mean, just a way about him, and that's
Yeah.
how he plays.
And those pieces, the athletic pieces that he can pick up going back to the South, that's the thing. Rick's time spent in places like Louisville and at Kentucky will always serve him well, as a national recruiter. And when we go those moments in the huddle and you see him, I close my eyes and I listen to him and I'm thinking about Hubie Brown. He just sounds so much like Hubie when he's teaching in a 45-second to minute 30 clip to his guys about, hey, we're calling off that full court because your denial is not there. It's not getting it done.
He's got that thick
We
accent.
will trap out of the half court, but you got to talk to one another. When he does that, that is so Hubie Brown. And all of us have known Hubie or worked with him, and I did some at Turner in the 3 years between my time at ESPN and at CBS. That's just who he is. And
yeah.
Rick did have, I thought, a little bit of a senior moment after that Seton Hall loss. His patience wasn't maybe what it needed to be. But who among us that have, at 68, I'm not as patient as I was at 48. I know that. Yeah. But he was guilty of one thing, being way too honest and way too transparent. And he was just going to say it. And if he had to back himself into that kind of corner to be the bad guy and to have the New York press come after him, that really took the heat off the players. He's accustomed to having people come after him. He had to grow thick skin through the years.
I don't know if it took the heat off the players or if it put the heat on them in a different way.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And his own, he coaches better when he puts himself under the gun.
Yeah.
He's a better coach when people are doubting him. And I think after that episode, people were doubting him, and that just fueled him to get the most out of his guys. And most of those players have been called a lot worse.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I mean, they have. And so they're accustomed to it. He hurt the feelings of maybe some of their parents. He hurt the feelings of a lot of members of the press. Mm-hmm. And that's like, to him, no big deal.
Yeah.
That's always the way he's been. Through my years of working with Rick, we actually did an NCAA tournament together in 2000 when he was fired from Boston. And before he took the job with Louisville, we did an NCAAs together. Steve Shear was our producer in Dayton. We did the very first play-in game in 2000. I remember it was Winthrop with Northwestern State in that game. And there was only one game then. They didn't have the first four then. They just had a play-in game, a one-game play-in. And then we did the 6 games and 8 teams in Dayton at that region that year. And I could tell, I learned so much about him at that point. Rick has an insatiable need and appetite to be beloved. He wants to be appreciated. And sometimes he may want it too much, and it'll get the blowback from it. This was yet another example of that. And in the end, the maestro does have a method to his madness, and you can see it by what's happened. Now, they can't afford to lose. I think they could not afford to lose that game against Georgetown. That would have been a devastating loss.
Yeah.
And they were only up 1 with about 3.5 minutes to play in the game yesterday.
Yeah, it was close.
So Georgetown made them work. That'll only make them more dangerous. And now they've gotten the help they needed from Providence and Villanova, and they don't have to play the extra game. They got moved off the Wednesday format and now get to play Seton Hall. And I think that is a great matchup on Thursday. Oh my God, that's Seton Hall St. John's game. Think about what's at stake for those teams. Now, they could both get in, fellas, but you can make a real case that the quality of life for Shaheen Holloway or Rick Pitino will be affected big time by who wins that game.
I agree with you.
I think that's one of the
lot riding on that one.
Yeah, he's one of the best young coaches.
There's some interesting matchups in the first round. You look at that second game, the Providence Georgetown. How ironic that those two teams get matched up after all that went on, right? With Cooley and
And Kim English, I think, has done a tremendous job in
Awesome.
his
I
first year
think he
there.
does a great job. Yeah.
He would get a lot of consideration in my mind for coach of the year with what he had to, those are size 22 and a halves that Ed Cooley left. Okay.
Right.
And he fit in beautifully. What is he, only 35, 36 years old?
He's
a young man and coaching at this high a level. But he's been tutored and worked under some of the best in the business. I think that he's got a calm about him and a swagger about him that you really like. It's almost like the former player that's in him is still there, and I think he identifies a lot with those guys. And I know down deep that UConn loss, the way it happened in the second half, really pissed him off. Just like they played. I did the first UConn Providence game that was a rock fight with all those fouls, and I thought we were going to have a couple of brawls in that game. And Hurley kind of got caught up in it at the end of the game with some of the fans. I noticed.
I just saw that. He talked about it in the presser afterwards too.
Oh,
yeah. Well, the guy starts yelling at me.
That whole New England rivalry thing is big. Private school versus public school, all that stuff. Matters.
He coached at University of Rhode Island too, so
that's right.
He said that as he left the presser, Sonny. He said, "Go Huskies, go Rhodey," and he walked off. And he walked off. Well, he's crazy. I mean, we spent time with him, at media day. He was a lot of fun with us. That's how Danny is. He's always been.
Never forget where you come from.
And his credit, Chuck, to his credit, he owns it. He
100%.
He owns it. It's an endearing feature of his.
I will tell you that just from the standpoint of preparing for games, last year when I would go in to do games, and I've known his brother Bobby, I've known his dad for a long time. Rhodey, his teams at Rhode Island, I never saw. I didn't do 8-10 games, so I wasn't going to see them. But he was so business-like with his team, and his practices were pretty hard. And really, you didn't talk to him at all until, he would go from the floor to the film room, and you'd have to wait for them to come out from the film room for him to talk to you. You're there for an hour and a half, maybe, the day before a game, before he actually talks to you. Most coaches are pretty comfortable at least acknowledging the fact that we're there, no matter who the announcers are. They're pretty good about, acknowledging that we're there and coming over maybe during, hey, switch ins, fellas. And while that happens, they come over and talk to us a little bit about the game and whatnot. But there was always a sense of a year ago on their way. And I didn't know they would win the national title. I thought they had a shot, but they looked pretty beatable in the Big East before they got on that unbeatable run in the NCAAs. And so it was just at times I thought there was a lack of comfort in dealing with us, that maybe he didn't understand that we're not regular media. We're the television people here call the games. We're your partners. We're your television partners. We're trying to tell the best story that there is to tell about your teams. Okay, that's the way we've always approached it with coaches. A lot of younger coaches, especially ones that have quick tempers, and Danny's got that, they need to kind of go through it and understand it. This year, and maybe it's because he won the national championship, and maybe because he now understands, how this thing works, and because you're UConn and you're number one, you're going to see a lot of the same guys during basketball season. You're going to see a lot of me, a lot of Raph, a lot of Gus, a lot of Jimmy Jackson, a lot of Donnie Marshall. You're going to see a lot of us. And he's just so much more at ease. He'll come over and talk. Hey, Timmy B, let's take that shot. Let's get a picture.
Well,
he
is allowed to sit at the dinner table now. So
that's
a big load that was lifted off his shoulders.
And that's I think what we all didn't understand. Maybe I didn't. Maybe a few people, probably Raph understood because he talked about it with me. But Danny Hurley was always the other Hurley. In the national landscape of basketball, his dad was the Hall of Fame St. Anthony's coach. Mm-hmm. His brother was one of the most hated players and two-time national champion at Duke.
Yep.
And if you were thinking about Hurley, what was the other guy's name? Oh, it's Danny.
Right.
Yeah, didn't he back up? Didn't he? I mean, he played with DeHare, didn't he? I was like, was that the guy that played when Terry DeHare
Yeah.
was at Seton Hall? You know, that kind of stuff would come up. And so, yes, seat at the table and status within his own family, all right, was a problem for him, I think, for a long time. And now that's been erased. And I just see a much more mature version of him now.
Yeah.
I mean, despite what you might have seen at the end of the game last night on Twitter or on X, he wants to do that. That's just who he is.
Yeah.
He wants to stir the pot, but he's much more in command of his emotions now. And it shows with the way his team responds to him.
Yeah.
I mean, they respond in such an enormous way. And, you know, guys like, look what he did with Tristan Newton, by example. Tristan Newton last year, fellas, was probably the weak link in late January, early February to that team. Wasn't really a proven point guard. His shot wasn't necessarily the best always. You know, they might get better play out of Hassan Diarra on a given night that they would get out of Tristan Newton. So if you were looking to attack UConn, you probably thought, let's attack Newton. All right, let's. And in a lot of ways, Jackson really helped them with that. They let Jackson bring the ball up the floor sometimes. You know, they'd move the ball around a little bit, take the heat off Tristan. Well, Newton is now the straw that stirs the drink for that team. He is their leader. He's their glue.
Yeah.
And they've got like 4 or 5 guys in double figures, but Newton,
he's getting 15 and 7 now, Tim.
Yeah, and I mean he's a giant. And in my mind, I would vote Baylor Shireman of Creighton as the player of the year. I would, but I don't think enough guys will because of the Omaha versus 5 boroughs and you know, tri-state region factor. I think Newton is going to be the player of the year. I do.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I think Newton's going to be the player of the year. I think he'll get more votes, and but I think Shireman has actually been the best player in the league.
Those teams just came out today. The first team and second team all Big East.
Did they?
Yeah. So let me read it down to you. Tristan Newton, Cam Spencer, Shireman, like you just said, Tyler Kolek, Devin Carter, and Kadari Richmond. That's the first team.
That's a great team. That's a great team. Yeah.
I think they got that right. You know,
they did. Yeah, absolutely did.
Yeah.
The second team is Trey Alexander, who's playing great right now. He destroyed us the other night.
Yeah, he did.
Ryan Kalkbrenner.
Okay. Iguodaro.
I'm gonna Iguodaro. Yep.
Yeah.
Danish Jenkins and Eric Dixon from
another great team.
Another good. I think they got it right. I mean,
they did. Yeah, I agree.
Well, what's
I'd
funny
like to see those 2 teams match up.
That would be a hell of a game.
It would be.
You know, preseason, Tristan, he spoke about missing some of the parts of their playbook.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he talked a little bit about that. He felt like, you know, the pressure on him, and he wasn't super comfortable in the conversation, but you could just tell that he was really going to have his feet underneath him this year. If I could say something afterwards.
Yeah.
And here you go. I mean, so not surprised at all.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, Tim. What were, you know, being that you were there for pretty much everything this year, what were some of the surprises from teams and players that might have surprised you? Either way, disappointing or surprise in a good way?
I really thought, and I really felt that UConn was going to be great, but I certainly didn't think they'd be as great, okay, with some of the losses. Like, you know, Klingon was both, he could get hurt. You know, he missed about 3 or 4 games earlier in the year.
Yeah.
Didn't really affect them. They were able to get through that period.
His minutes have been cut back, too, to protect him a little bit.
Yeah. And Samson Johnson, who can be as athletic, now they have to play it differently when he comes in. Okay, they don't run the offense through Klingon like they do in the half court when he's out there, understandably. But I didn't think that team could be this much better than the one that played a year ago when they had Sonogo and Klingon. All right, but this team to me is much better than the team of a year ago. I mean, they went.
I think the guy here. I think the guy that has made the difference in that team is Cam Spencer.
No doubt.
Guy
no doubt.
shooting 45% from three. He was a great shooter at Rutgers last year.
Right.
And
And he
people didn't see
also
him, in the Big East guys didn't see him.
and he also makes big defensive plays.
He does.
Big defensive
Surprisingly very good defender. Yep.
He plays
he
real hard too, Tim.
Yeah,
real hard.
They're the two best guys I got to see Purdue twice this year, and I got to see UConn like 5 times.
Right.
So, but out of the 4 Big Ten games I did, I had Purdue twice, and it happened that Edey, and they struggled that day. Rutgers gave them a really good go. For whatever reason, Peichel's teams have just matched up well against Purdue through the years. I guess because of their defense. He's such a good defensive coach.
Yeah.
And this was, they had a lot of injuries this year, lost a lot of their team really offensively, Rutgers. But they now have in Lance Jones, number 55 for Purdue. He plays a similar position to Cam Spencer, like a 2-3 swing combo player. And he can also nail shots, but he's incredibly athletic defensively. And that was what Purdue's problem was when they fell behind in games. They couldn't make up ground because they couldn't pressure you.
Right.
And the reason they couldn't pressure you is because a guy like Shaheen Holloway at St. Peter's or any other team that's got that much quickness, they would blow right past your press. Lawyer and some of the other guards on that team just weren't quick enough. They didn't have the foot speed to press during a game when they got behind. Now Purdue can do that. Well, Connecticut can do that the whole game. They can play 11 guys if they so desire. Right. I mean, if Diarra comes in, no problem. If the kid out of Seattle comes into the game, Newton, they're fine when he comes in the game. The big difference maker for them also is Castle. Stefan Castle is an NBA lottery pick.
Yeah, just
I don't know that he'll even be there next year.
No, so probably not.
They've got so much artillery that I just didn't know that they could be this much better than they were a year ago, and I think they are. To me, they have a much better chance of doing it back-to-back than even Billy Donovan's teams did at Florida when they did it back-to-back in 06 and 07. So that's probably the most surprising thing about the Big East.
Their top 5 guys, Tim, are all scoring within a point or two of each other.
Yeah.
Which is nice because now everybody's happy, and when you're happy, you play hard, you don't have a bad attitude,
Right. The team that has the best chance of beating them in this tournament, the team that has, I think, a great chance also of going to the Final Four, that's not going to get much press going into Selection Sunday, is Creighton. And the reason is Ryan Kalkbrenner has emerged and gotten stronger and can play more minutes. And he is a rim runner just like Klingon. Okay. He can match up and play from a defensive standpoint against Klingon in ways that nobody else in the league can.
Right.
Their problem early in the season when they went through their funk was Ashworth was not their guard was not playing well because he was trying to be Ryan Nembhard, and he's not Ryan Nembhard. He's a shooter. He's a combo guard, and he was trying to be someone that he wasn't. A little bit like Armstrong at Villanova.
Right.
But the same kind of story, trying to be the kind of player that Villanova wants him to be and just not being himself, not playing his own game.
Right.
And I think that when Villanova started figuring things out finally, it was when Armstrong stopped worrying about being Brunson or being Gillespie, and he started just playing his game.
Yep.
That's when Villanova improved. Same thing happened with Creighton when this kid got better, because Trey Alexander is a beast, can score from anywhere. Shireman can score from anywhere. And they are deep. But Kalkbrenner now can play 37, 38 minutes. I don't think he was strong enough a year ago to play for a long period of time. I thought he would get gassed. I think now he is. I think that's the team. Remember now, they were one bad call and 1 second away from going to the Final Four last year, and San Diego State got a break and was able to get there, and they didn't. But I think
my only question with those guys, Tim, is I've seen them play a bunch of games this year. I watched a bunch of times.
Right.
They had us by 20 plus. Both games and gave it back.
Yeah.
And gave it back. Yesterday.
Play. They can shoot themselves to a big lead and then shoot themselves out of it.
Exactly. And then when you get into the tournament, anything goes. I mean, all
Yeah,
you need is a bounce here or there. You get a hot
yeah,
club.
Yeah.
No. I don't know. I don't know if they have that grit to keep leads. I mean, the games that I saw, it should have been
right.
lights out at halftime.
Right. Well, there are times when you watch them because of the way they play. Everything they do is offensive generated.
Yeah.
He's a great offensive coach. Teams will tell you that they're the hardest team to prepare for with the things that they do
Yeah.
offensively. Coaches just they go bazonkers trying to deal with what Greg McDermott's offenses are all about. But they are playing, I think, against teams that know them well in the league. And I think that much like Connecticut last year, right? They got better when they got out of the league, when they started playing teams that really didn't know how to play them. Well, I think Creighton is the same story. I think they're a mismatch in ways that teams, once you get out of the league and that whole thing opens up in the NCAA tournament, you don't have to deal with the same,
Right.
rock fight kind of thing that you have to deal with in terms of scouting with the Big East tournament. The floor opens up, and that really helps Creighton out. I do think that their defensive deficiencies show up a lot more when in the Big East than they will when they go into the NCAA tournament. So that's the
Yeah.
reason I like them as much as I do.
I got to ask you about Shaheen at Seton Hall.
Yeah.
To me, I
Yeah.
think that's the greatest, not
Yeah.
surprise, but the greatest uprising there.
Don't you think he's going to get Coach of the Year?
Yeah. Now
Yeah.
I got to ask you. He seems like he has just a different relationship with his players.
Yeah.
You
He
feel
talks
it,
their
you see
language.
it, right? I mean,
Yeah. He talks
what
their
what what do you
language.
pick up on?
Yeah. He talks. He can look at them and they know what he means.
Right?
It's not so much. It's not so much what he says, because a lot of times when you're talking with Shaheen, as he's talking about things, you have a hard time understanding him because he's saying it so quickly. You know what I mean? It's street talk, in a lot of ways, but that's the way he played the game. And when he's talking about his players to his players, they get it. And he'll never get in trouble for saying something improper. But if you looked at his face while he's saying it, the player might go, "Oh God, coach is pissed." He doesn't. It's not so much what he says, but how he looks when he's saying it. Yeah, he gets the. Kadari Richmond was, this. Boeheim let him go and said, "Go get you some." He couldn't have cared less when Kadari Richmond left, really. But Kadari, his game could not show up in the style of play that Boeheim wanted, and he needed to get to a guy like Shaheen Holloway. He did,
Yeah.
because Shaheen is willing to say to any player, "Hey, clear out and let my guy go. If we're in a bad situation here and we just need a bucket coming out of a timeout, we're going to let Kadari go do it." And that freedom of movement and freedom to play, your particular game, he really gets that.
But there's
I
also
think
a toughness. There's
yeah,
also this grit.
yeah,
Chuck talked about it a little bit with Creighton, that maybe it's missing a little there. But and I remember him saying that, like, these guys are, they're this, they're
yeah,
bully. We're from New York and New Jersey. This is who we are, and
yeah, yeah.
it's just in his DNA, and it just
Sure
seems
it
like
is.
that translates.
Yeah, as it does. He reminds me of. He's a more street version of Shaka Smart in terms of,
Yeah.
his philosophy.
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
Shaka has got a Midwestern approach with his personality.
Yeah,
That'll never leave him. He's really a Wisconsin guy, and he's got his dream job now at Marquette. And he's been a perfect fit. A great year a year ago, another fantastic season this year, and even with Kolik's injury the last couple of weeks, look how well they played with Cam Jones having to play the point, and
Yeah.
and Iguodaro in foul trouble the other night. I thought, they fought hard and made a nice comeback against Connecticut. I did the first game between Marquette and Connecticut, and that game was tied at 18 with about 10 and a half minutes left. Iguodaro got a second foul, and it was over. I mean, UConn just took off. Well, Iguodaro got a second foul this time. It was 17-16, and then Connecticut blew away to about a 13-point halftime lead. But this time Marquette came back and played their butts off and closed it within like 4 or 5 points before losing by 7. So, and how did they do it? They did it with defense. They clamped down, and he gets the most out of his guys from a defensive standpoint. I think Shaheen's similar. He doesn't have as much offensive talent. Besides, Kadari, it's more like, Alamir Dawes needs to have a big day. If he doesn't show up in a given game, then they may struggle. But they find ways to win. They just find a way.
And they rebound without size. They rebound. They're
right,
just
right.
tenacious.
And I think I guarantee you that's what Patino's got on his mind going into the game with Seton Hall, as he knows, this will be a redemption game. He's going to approach it that way with his guys. They out-toughed you. You lost a big lead because you lacked toughness. And those kids from Jersey, they're tough. Their coach is tough. You better get tough. That's going to have that. I cannot wait for that game. I think that's going to be an unbelievable game and environment in the Garden in the quarterfinals. And fellas, all my years doing this, I've done ACC championships. I've done SEC championship games in the tournament. I've done Pac-12 championships, football and basketball. There's nothing like the Big East tournament. And in the quarterfinals, you'll have an environment that's as good on day 2 as it is at the other places on day 4.
Right.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yep.
I mean, that just is what makes that place. Part of it is where the arena is located, and that's a destination site. And the other part of it is these incredible storylines, like you mentioned, Chuck. Providence, how ironic that it's going to be against Cooley and Georgetown. Any other matchup really, and the Georgetown game, you probably wouldn't really be looking forward to, right?
Yeah, you wouldn't have
it.
It
Just works out that it's going to be Providence that they're playing again.
I definitely want to see that one.
Yeah, you don't want to miss it. And last year, UConn back in the league, and they're playing who on day 2? Providence. And Cooley had this great year, and he had taken them to an outright title in the regular season not that long ago, and they go down 25. Do you remember that comeback that Providence made in the last 10 minutes last year in that game? It was incredible, and every possession was just enormous, and you got fans for both sides almost on the floor, up going nuts. You don't see that even in an NCAA tournament game when it's played at Madison Square Garden. You just don't.
Yeah. So how many teams from the Big East do you think get a bid this year?
I think no less than 6. And if somebody does something really amazing, maybe 7 in this tournament. And now I think that would, if you get the 7th, I think that team would be, it would have to be Butler or Xavier, pulling off the unthinkable and beating UConn the second day.
Yeah.
Okay. I do think the winner of that game is dangerous. Okay.
Oh yeah.
I think the winner of that game is dangerous. I don't know if they can pull it off, but I think Thad Matta's team, after getting a sweat worked up, or Sean Miller's team. I mean, either one of those teams, I think, is very dangerous. I mean, we were talking about, as you mentioned, Sonny, 2 great coaches there, that know how to prepare their teams and have had a lot of tournament success.
Yeah.
In the past, no matter where they coached.
Yep.
And both have a very similar demeanor, like
they do,
like an inner confidence that translates to their players.
Right. Yeah. Sean's more combustible than Thad. He's more combustible.
We're going to hang our hat on combustible. All right.
Yeah. But I love the intensity, I mean, I just love the intensity. And, one of the great games I got to call in my Big East history that really jumps out at me is Derek Coleman and Sherman Douglas and Stevie Thompson all on the floor, 88. Was that the first year for Billy Newell Owens too? Was that 88 his first year, or was it 87?
Let's see. Derek was a freshman in 87.
Maybe it was 89.
Billy was a freshman in 88. Yeah.
Yeah.
Billy was 88. Okay. So it was the 88 season. They're number 1 in the country. Vital and
I
come in
88, 89, right? That
year. The 88, 89 team. Yeah. And we come in there in mid-December. So it was a December conference game with Pitt, and Sean Miller's a freshman operating at the point. And they pulled
Matthews.
off Shorter. All those guys were playing for Pitt with Paul Evans, and they beat Boeheim's team. Okay. And Sean Miller, I mean, they were everyone thought Sherman was just going to eat his lunch.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody thought, but Sean Miller didn't think so. I mean, you talk about a tough nut. He was. Yep. And he was a coach on the floor as a freshman. And what a memorable game that was. I remember after it was over, Freddie Grimaldi was going to host us all the ESPN crew at Grimaldi's, the old Grimaldi's.
That place is great. I know that place.
The old Grimaldi's. Yep. And Boeheim was supposed to join us, but he no-showed after that.
I could fill in the blank there.
Yeah, he no-showed. Yeah. I remember PJ lost a close one. He had never beaten Boeheim there. And we were there once for a game. And PJ had a good team this year, that particular year, too. Might have been the team that went to the Final Four, but they lost a close one. And PJ came. He hung out, stayed. Boeheim did show up for that, because, he loved PJ. But PJ said, if I had won that game, that blankety blank wouldn't be here. It was great. But I'll always remember that game and getting to call the Ernie Pops Lewis winner against Georgetown when Patino and John Thompson went at it at midcourt. Raft and I were doing that game in '87. And that was the first time that they had beaten them there at the old, what they called then the Providence Civic Center.
Providence Civic Center.
Or the Dunk. Exactly. It was the old Providence Civic Center back then. And we all went to Jody DeRamo's place, the Players Corner Pub. And trust me, I did not have to buy one drink that night. I mean, a lot of cigars and a lot of libations, or as Raft would say, a lot of lemonade was consumed after that game.
It seems to follow Raft everywhere he goes.
Yeah, a lot of lemonade, Timmy.
He's the best, man. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming out and sharing your night with us. Just so you know, I mean, we do our due diligence here, Tim.
Yeah,
I mean, we are. We like to coin the phrase professional.
We are professional journalists.
Yes. I think you're the supreme when it comes to podcast journalism.
That's it.
I do.
That's it. So we have our minions out, and I gotta ask you. The word is on the street, and we
on the street.
We had some people at the Big East.
Our people,
the Big East conference.
You know people.
We know people.
I know people.
We know people.
That's right. Do you even know this? I hope I'm not breaking news, but the Jim O'Connell Big East Media Award. Am I talking to the Big East Media Award winner?
Okay. Do I have to blow my cover now? Are you telling me I got to blow my cover?
I'm asking. You don't have to answer it. I'm asking.
I'm really flattered. Yeah, I'll for you guys. I'm sure that stop the presses. I'm sure somebody on deadline at the New York Post is going to be like, "Did you hear this?"
So now, Sonny, we're breaking news.
Oh, breaking news!
Breaking news.
Well, gotta be us.
Congratulations, my friend.
Yeah, no, I'm beyond flattered about this. John Paquette, the associate commissioner who I've known forever.
What a great guy.
He was actually working at Seton Hall when I came into the league.
Right. He was Seton Hall.
Before he went to the Big East. And I'll always remember Mike Tranghese was the right-hand man to Mr. Gavitt back in those days, and later became the commissioner. And but those relationships that you have with these guys that had faith in you. And look, I was I know for a fact I am the most Southern broadcaster the Big East has ever had. Being born and raised in Louisiana and coming up really through the SEC and ACC. I was doing ACC tournament games up until Raycom lost the rights in the last ESPN deal, and they started a cable network with ACC's name on it back in 2020. My first year to do the tournament, the Big East tournament, was 2020, the infamous tournament where St. John's and Creighton had their game called at halftime, the game that never happened, but for 20 minutes it did. But I had already done my fair share of SEC and ACC title games. But when I got the nod from Steve Anderson years ago, and he told me that Mr. Gavitt was going to allow me to call a game in the Big East, I was thrilled. I mean, it was as good as getting a call saying, "Hey, Tim, you're going to do the NCAA tournament." That's how good it felt. Okay. for me at age 29. And then to continue on and follow and get to know and build relationships with people in the Big East, where basketball is king. It's the only thing. It is king in that league. Really meant a lot to me. And then when I came back to join forces with Fox and didn't do the tournament until 6 years in to what has now been 10 full years of working there, joining up with Gus Johnson to do the Big East tournament. Yeah. This has been a blast for me. And last year, Raft was the recipient. I think it was the second time that he got the award. Yeah. And Raft said when he got the award last year, he said, "Yeah, they ran out of people to give it to, so they give it to me again."
Pretty good rap impression.
So
yeah, it's pretty good. He's pretty spot. You know what?
It might be better than Billis.
Everybody Sonny has got a Raft impression and a Jim Boeheim impression.
Jim Boeheim and Raft, 100%.
No question.
Yeah.
But anyway, when John Paquette called me and let me know about this about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was thrilled and flattered, honored, all of that, because the college basketball is the thing in the Big East. And the award, because it's got Jim O'Connell's name on it, and the Big East, because it's the basketball conference in our country, to recognize, my work over time is really something that I will hold near and dear. And I'm flattered beyond belief. Raft will say, "Timmy B, you could never be humbled, but you're humbled." And that's true, because I am. And I was really flattered that they thought of me in such a way. But I guarantee you, Raft will be the first to say, "Well, Tim, after me, you're the next oldest."
That's right. That's probably right.
That's probably what he's going to say.
Yep. Well, congratulations.
Yes, congratulations. Well deserved.
Thank you.
And we appreciate you, Tim, like we said at the beginning of the show, for supporting us and showing us love over the season and always being willing to come on whenever we ask. It's really, thank you very, very much for that. We appreciate it.
Well, I'm always happy to do it. And listen, Sonny, I understand. I feel your pain about the Qs when they're playing in DC or in Greensboro, but I also admire how you are still very much a part of the Big East, because I talk to Syracuse people all the time that still feel that way. I mean, you're speaking for them too, I think.
Oh, I can't tell you how many people
rue
the day we left the Big East.
I ran into Boeheim this year while he was doing some television and radio work. We were doing an Illinois game, and he was there for Westwood One. It's amazing how guys like even Boeheim, I knew Jay Wright would be great on TV. Now Boeheim is like a court jester,
He's a funny guy.
For years, the only guy that kept Boeheim from being like the most vilified of all the villains was Jim Calhoun. He always used Calhoun to prop him up. But
contrast is a great thing, isn't it?
He's having a blast now doing what we do, and there is life after coaching. I think a lot of these guys find that out. So, but I've had a wonderful time, and I'll always be here for you whenever you need me.
Well, thanks, Tim. We appreciate that.
You bet.
We've been talking with our guest, the great Timmy B, Tim Brando of Fox Sports, the color commentator, the play-by-play commentator for the Big East Conference. Tim's got 5 games in 24 hours. Good luck, Tim. You're gonna have to save your voice now, buddy.
I will.
Yeah, careful on the lemonade.
Yeah, watch the lemonade. That's right. Take it easy.
Thanks, fellas. Bye-bye.
So you've been listening to the Big East Rewind with Chuck Everson and Sonny Spera. The Big East Rewind is produced and directed by Nick Chico Chorus and Daryl Gurney. You can check us out on all things social media by putting in Big East Rewind in the search bar, and go to our website at www.bigeastrewind.com and subscribe and stay up to date on everything Big East Conference. Thanks a lot for joining us. Enjoy the basketball tournament. Enjoy the tournament this weekend, and have a great day. Take care.
Thanks, folks. Enjoy it.